I've seen them out there for 10, 15 years, and we're finally doing the maintenance on them, and they've been running just fine, but they do recommend the 5 to 10 year maintenance. Advantages of doing that maintenance is you know you have newer soft goods in it, and the other advantage is you get familiar with it. I've seen so many of these out there, and it's a great thing and it's a downfall. You usually put them in and they run, and you never have to do anything with them other than your yearly check. I mean, for the most part, they're workhorses. They run just fine. But the downside to that is if something does go wrong, like a diaphragm ruptures, or it starts acting erratically, pretty much people are, I've never touched one before. I've never ripped it apart before because you never had to. So that is the one advantage to having that little maintenance program. Because if you're ripping a few of these apart a year to do a maintenance, if you stagger them, you become familiar with them. You become familiar with the setting of it, how you have to do it. So we'll go through taking them apart, just a little bit of troubleshooting. We talked about how to make a valve move, we have to pressurize or vent the gas. And that gets done through the pilot, or if we're using volume boosters, it gets done through the volume boosters. But there's only one place. So on a single acting, we send our power gas through the power gas balance valve. This is the vent balance valve up on top. So
You two want to sit back, just go back so
when we're powering, sending power gas, the vent is closed. When we're venting, the power gas is closed. But on these, there's ports and they're labeled exhaust. That is the only place you should ever have gas coming out of here. And it should only be when the valve is moving in the direction that it should be venting. Again, on one of these pilots, if we're opening the valve on a direct acting or closing it, it may be just powering, sending gas, but when we want it to move the opposite direction of the spring, it's going to be venting gas out of there. Same thing on a double acting, you have an exhaust port listed on here. Same thing, you know, if we're venting, powering one side of the cylinder and we want to make it move, we have to vent the other side to make that pressure differential across the cylinder. So on these, you should only ever have gas coming out of this one. Now, a lot of your stations, especially if they're inside stations, they're venting them to the outside, you won't hear that vent, you won't hear that gas going out because it's venting outside the building. If you have gas coming out any other place, you will see like there is another vent port right here. Little vent ports that will go on the bottom. This one has a vent port on the back right here, so it has a vent port right there. But those are to indicate if you've blown a diaphragm. So on this one right here, this chamber right here is open to atmosphere. But I have a diaphragm, my sensing diaphragm here, and my upper balance diaphragm here. So if either one of these diaphragms rupture, I'm going to get gas coming out of there. If my lower one ruptures, it's either going to be coming out of the glass in your sensitivity drum or out of the bottom vent. So if you're getting gas coming out of any of those vents, you know you have a ruptured diaphragm, you have to take it apart and rebuild it. Pilot may work for the time being because it's over, you know, it's not leaking enough, but it is going to change the way your valve reacts. And same thing on this one, there's a vent here, so you have a diaphragm here, diaphragm here, diaphragm here, diaphragm here, diaphragm here. So if you're having gas coming out of the sensitivity drum area or out of the bottom vent, you know you've ruptured those diaphragms. So again, there's only one place that it should be coming out. Okay?
Are they labeled exhaust and the other one is
The
labeled
other ones,
vent?
yeah, if you see, they do engrave it in there, so it is
Okay.
engraved exhaust.
But I'm saying the one that's the vent is labeled vent, or is that labeled exhaust?
No, they're not
also?
labeled at all.
They're
Yeah,
not labeled.
just
Okay.
the exhaust is labeled. And this one says P4. The newer ones, you know, actually, does this one even have numbers? Yeah, so this is actually one of the newer ones. Where they are actually starting to number all your plates, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, which comes in handy when you put them back together. So that's that part there. Any
No, but
questions?
On those
that?
vents, is that where you would put a deodorizer if you have to?
The exhaust one is where you would want
Okay.
to put the, so your exhaust gas, because again, you shouldn't have gas coming out of those other vents, and you don't want to
Right.
You wouldn't want to vent
indicator, see
these
if you pop it out.
diaphragm vents to the outside. And the reason is, if you come into a station,
Yeah.
you want to hear that gas is coming out of
Right
there
there,
because
yeah.
now you know that I've ruptured a diaphragm. If you are venting it to the outside and it's going past your roof line, guys would never know that diaphragm has a leak in it. But I've been, guys usually go into a station and are like, oh, where's that gas? Where's that noise coming from? And they come here and they'll find that it's leaking from one of those vents. But the exhaust one, if you have odorized gas at your stations, especially if you're at a station where, you're odorizing right there, where it's gonna be really strong, they do sell canisters, deodorization canisters, that you can put on there. A lot of stations aren't, it depends if you have odorized gas at your station or if you don't. A lot of times these valves, these would be placed before your odorizer, so you're odorizing after the pressure.
Yeah, we've had complaints at Hyman it's very residential area.
Sure.
And I guess the Beckers are venting and they're getting complaints
Sure.
of
Yeah, so wherever, is it an inside station, outside station?
Below grade.
below, yeah.
It's a below grade.
But it's like
so-
right in front of people's houses,
Yeah.
basically.
So wherever that vent is, if you combine the vents, just at the end of that vent line, you could put one of those deodorization canisters. And then you'll just have to keep smelling at it every now and then, go by the
Change it
station,
out.
smell the vent and
That's
see if
right.
it smells like gas. If you're still smelling clean, you don't have to replace it, but depending on how odorized your gas is will be how often.
Because our
you have
other
to
option would
replace
be to tube it into a lower pressure system, right?
If you have one available.
Okay.
Yeah, you do need to have that differential.
Yeah.
If we're doing
Yeah,
125 supply
That's
gas to
okay.
this,
With Walter, right?
Yeah.
yeah, if you're doing 125 supply gas to this, you have to have, I'm not sure
It said,
exactly.
I think the manual says less than 60 PSI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would have to have a downstream system, and if you have that, then that truly makes it zero atmospheric bleed.
Right.
So you will have no atmospheric bleed. So if you have the opportunity to do it environmentally, that's a good thing to do.
Mhm.
So I haven't seen usually you're at a gate station, so you're cutting from 1,000 to 300 pounds, so you're not able to do that, bleed to a line,
Yeah, there's one like up the block or a couple blocks away, right? We've talked about maybe running
Yeah.
some new line to get
Yeah.
that line down.
So Rob is gonna work on taking that apart, and then after he takes that apart, we'll go into doing a setting of pilots. So we'll set that double acting pilot as if we did it from the beginning, so we'll do a factory setting. So
Yeah, just to save
everybody gets
thing we
familiar
have
with
a-
how to do that, what to
It's a
look
big
for,
red F.
how to set the dead band on it, or the sensitivity on it, how to properly set that sensitivity. So, get that out of the way.
All right. So,
You really are the new guy. They gave you the presentation, now you gotta break things down.
they're just making me do it.
Ah.
You know how that
The
feels.
water bottles are.
So obviously, the first thing you do when you're taking apart a pilot,
Hate
is
to
you're
be
gonna
that
take off
guy.
any
Just
spring
put the
tension
water
that's
on.
on there, so you'll rotate this counterclockwise.
Children. One thing when you're taking these apart, if you've never taken them apart, you should have the manual with you. If you haven't taken it apart in a while, a lot of times you may not have touched one for a year, maybe 2 years.
Probably why we went
Get the manual out. The manual does have documentation how to take it apart. In the manual, it actually starts with
Still works.
assembly of the pilot instead of disassembly, so you just work from the back and work forward. When we take everything apart, when I take it, this is the way I do it, I will lay everything out as I take it apart. Because we're gonna see there's a lot of parts in there. So when we're putting it back together, you work in reverse and you make sure that you don't leave anything down. So it's have a nice clean work area. Make sure if I'm working on gravel, I'll actually lay a tarp down because there's little screws, especially on the inside. You have these little tiny screws. And if anybody's lost a screw in gravel, they know what it's like. The more you dig for it, the deeper it goes. And it's like bottomless. And so if you're working on gravel, because when a repair kit, you get a repair kit for these, they do not give you spares of these. You don't get bolts and screws, you get
That's an extra
soft-
$500 if you want that.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll rush one out for you. So,
Hey, try it out.
you do want a nice clean area,
Right.
you do wanna just lay stuff out as you take it out, just put it in order, and then when you're going back, you're just gonna work in reverse.
Chief, all you.
Another thing before you get started, to take a marker and, for each one of these, the metal connects, just take a mark. That way, when you're going to put this back together, that everything fits back in the same place and you don't, misalign any of your tubing.
Will
You have
it
to
work if
redo-
you put it back together like crooked or?
It'll work, but, you'll mess up with your tubing and then you'll have to retube it and stuff, or re-put it together, and, you won't be able to get the tubing.
Yeah, that's a big thing. If I take this section and I just rotate it here when I put it back together, the pilot's still gonna work like it's supposed to work, but I took tubing off. When I took this off the pipeline, there's tubing hooked up to it with your power gas and your sensing gas. So you're gonna go to put it back together and your valve's here, but my tube's here. So you're either gonna have to then take this off, put it back together, or retube. So you don't wanna have to do either. So that's why it's just a good way. You'll see on this one, like some people will write, because these plates, they will go back either way. But there's no arrow on them, so some people will just take a Sharpie and just put a little, especially if you haven't done a little while, just say, all right, that's up. So they know that that's the side that goes up. And pretty much everybody, I'm sure, has the best tool in their pocket, which is their phone. Take pictures when you're taking it apart. If you see a piece that you're starting to take apart, especially on a PID pilot, there's one that diaphragm section, there's like little metal rings with grooves in it, and it has to go back that way, so they have to face a certain way. So I'll take a little finger, I'll hold it up so I can see which way the groove is, snap a picture. So when you're going back and you get to that point where it's like, wait, which way did this go? Am I doing it right? You can go back to your pictures. It works great.
Can you generally put your beer down when you do this and use two hands? Just
I
curious.
recommend you have a beer at all
Okay.
times.
It's in the manual.
I'm clean now, Gene, I'm clean.
Page 2.
I leave the joint in my mouth. It's legal now, right?
Yeah, well,
Most places.
maybe.
I got medical problems.
All you gotta do is apply. But, so make sure you lay everything out nice and neat. As you take it apart, you take your jam nut, your set of screw nuts and washers off, and then I don't even know what you call this part exactly. But,
Frank.
Frank, yeah. And,
Yeah, what you call it?
we really should use the 175 version because this is a VRP 1000, and you can see the amount of screws that
Yeah.
it takes because it's the high pressure version.
Oh yeah, you can see this is a 600 version here. So that one has 12 bolts going around it. This one only has 6. So honestly, the biggest difference between the pilots, when you do them, if you look like this sensing chamber, could pretty much go to that sensing chamber. A lot of these are interchangeable in between. If you want to take a 600 pilot, like that one back there, make it into 1,000, they sell a retrofit kit. And it only is the upper section. It's a beefier section. It has an adapter plate to it. On all the pilots, the lower section, the balance valve area, they're all the same. They use the same diaphragms. So really the only different diaphragm that you get in here is going to be your sensing diaphragm. But the bottom sections, they're pretty much the same as far as the diaphragms. If you're doing a balance valves are the same, O-rings are the same, diaphragms are the same, whether it's a 175 or a 1500. It's the sensing area that changes. So, for those of you who've never taken one apart, the next step Rob is going to show you is one you want to pay attention to. Because I said, I learned it the hard way. My very first one that I worked at was with Tom Foley, our director of operations. I never touched one before. We were out in the field, no phone service. They ruptured a sensing diaphragm. So all we had to do was get this top section off. Because if you're going to rupture a diaphragm, if you have to, that's the one you wanna do, cause it's the easiest one to get to. You don't have a lot of you just have to get that top section off, it's right there, you put it on. You don't even have to mess with your dead band if you do that. So it's a lot easier to fix.
We changed the bottom.
But we got to this point,
I think that was 14
we
years
know
ago.
we had to take it off,
That's correct.
and
That's what I'm
it
talking about,
doesn't come off.
Yeah, maybe it was two different ones.
So, we do what any experienced type does, you get screwdrivers and a hammer, and you start whacking at it
The other one.
to try to pry that off, and you do everything you can. We spent 2 hours beating on that thing, and we went to lunch, and then Tom finally had that aha moment where he's like, I know what we have to do. So for somebody who doesn't know, Rob will show you.
This used to be a retired Western complex.
The cap is threaded on. So as you can see, as he unscrews that cap
Oh my God.
comes right off. So
You guys know that?
remember
You knew that?
that part.
They take all the bolts on top. comes off,
We
yeah,
talked
finish.
about
He's
the
threaded
sensing
on.
chamber. So the old versions, and you saw that in the gap, the sensing chamber was down here, spring chamber is up here. But now they have that combination chamber.
Mhm.
So every one of the pilots, when you are setting it, it's all about balance. It's all about balance between the sensing diaphragm and your spring tension. Whenever they're equal, you're at set point. So whenever the pressure pushing down on the sensing diaphragm and the spring tension, whenever they're equal, the shaft's not moving, we're not actuating the valve. When your sense pressure changes, it upsets that balance, the valve moves, eventually comes back to being in balance. So when they combine the chamber, most of your pilots, Fisher, Sensus, whatever pilots you set out there, you turn the screw clockwise and that increases your pressure. Counterclockwise decreases. When you're doing that, like when you increase your pressure, usually on a regulator, you're compressing a spring, pushing down on it when you twist that screw in, right? But we couldn't do that when a combined one, you can't do that because we're pushing down with the sensing. So we can't push down with the spring because you're pushing down in the same direction. So what happens is when they combined it, we have our sensing diaphragm that'll push down. But when we twist the screw in, we're actually lifting up on the spring. We're compressing up on that. So you have the posing of the diaphragm pushing down and the spring pulling up. To do that, they had to put a reverse screw in, a reverse through screw. So when you twist this in, and of course now they wanted to keep it like every other regulator so you don't get confused, that twisting in keeps the increases your pressure, counterclockwise decreases. But because it's a reverse thread, when I twist this screw clockwise, my screw pops out. When I go counterclockwise, my screw goes in. So just remember that. So when you twist that screw in, you're gonna see it coming out because we're compressing that spring upwards. So still works like every other pilot, regulator pilot. Clockwise increases, counterclockwise decreases.
Did you want to see the top?
I was gonna ask if can you just turn it towards us so we can see what you're actually taking off, or is
Yeah.
it gonna fall apart?
So,
Just real quick, just so we
Yeah,
can see
and if
what's in
anybody
there.
wants to get up, have a look.
so here, we're at this portion of it. Here, this is just immediately after taking off the top cap. That's what you see.
Cool.
And then next you take, you need your T wrenches here. You'll need a 9/64th, 5/32nd, and a 3/16th when you turn it apart.
I just have a little pouch of tools that I just made up for myself over the time just because I do them. So every tool I need to do a Becker is in this pouch to do any pilot. So before we leave, I'll leave my tools out if anybody wants to write down what tools. Or Gene, how much are we selling this one for?
They're just gonna take that one.
Raffle one off at the end of the training.
Just looked it up, it's free.
I'll just lay my tools out, you guys can look at them.
Did you see a metal detector on the way in?
Okay. Actually, Rob's got to a good part
That's a
here
great
where
idea.
he's going to take this
I'll
off.
sit around the room, see if the pouch comes back at the end.
Can't see?
You videotape?
Yeah.
That's what I have a flathead for, and hopefully.
Of course
it
you
We
works.
need something to use in the ventilator.
You've probably been tightening that enough underneath there, and that's why it's screwed. So when he's
You can
trying
get
to
Becker-
unscrew this one,
Anytime I have a
you
Becker
can see
problem,
how
I call
it's
this
just
guy.
twisting
You
the
didn't
whole
ask my
thing.
permission.
That's why I have
You're
a
not
little
on it.
screwdriver,
I just want-
just give me a little
What?
pull off.
You're not in.
Is it a set hole? Put a punch it or something?
You just gotta get something wedged in there till you break that. Very important when you're putting this together is nothing in here should get tight down as tight as you could do it. Everything is just snug. There are torque ratings that they will give in the manual for tightening certain bolts or nuts on this. Those torque ratings are in the inch pounds of torque, not feet pound. So it's 90 to 100 inch pounds. I think it gives you a range of saying, tighten it to 90 to 110. When I went to the factory for training, they said, you don't worry about a torque wrench. When you're tightening these things, they said you want to use what they call thumb torque. So when you're holding your tool, you kind of put your thumb on it, and as you're tightening it, you'll lose the blood. It'll press the blood out of your finger. So as you tighten it and your finger, turns color, that's tight enough. So nothing gets wrenched down really hard in this. So again, you're just looking at a few pounds of foot pounds of torque on this, which is not much. So
I'm saying, I don't think.
when you're
Me,
using your
little fellow over
little
there,
Allen
got the same
wrenches,
thought.
once you feel that flex starting to go in here where you're starting to flex on the shaft, it's tight enough.
Tight as tight.
Tight is tight, yeah. Going
Snug
over
for
tight on
everything,
that,
basically.
Yeah.
Snug.
in some aspects, you can run into issues with causing damage, especially when you get to the diaphragm section.
Yeah, you don't want to be tightening
Because
the
each
bolt on the
diaphragm is going to
diaphragm.
have
So when we
a
had the
nut on
2-foot wrench and the,
if you
just
tighten
later on
that
it,
too much, you have these little washers.
No.
If you really bear down on that hard, you
little
can
bit of both.
twist that diaphragm, put a little tiny tear on it, and that tiny tear will instantly become a big tear. And then you'll have to take it apart and replace it. So nothing extremely tight. Thumb torque on it.
I like that term too.
And if you put it tight, the next person has to take it apart, hopefully not you. You're screwing over somebody else instead, but they're gonna have trouble taking it apart.
So, once you get those 4 bolts out, you can see you can pull out the spring. You can see the, how it works here with the reverse thread and how it'll compress the spring when you turn it counterclockwise. Pull that out. Then you get a good look of the spring chamber inside. You got a nut inside there.
Not much to see.
Not much to see, but just so you get a look at
So,
it.
We're still in the easy section.
Yep. So, next step will be getting that nut out.
Yeah, if you guys look into that, there is a nut that we're gonna have to get out in there. And you can see it's actually in a little bit of a recess. So it's a 3/4 inch nut. And so you need a 3/4 inch socket. You do wanna have a 12-point socket or a thin wall socket. If you have a 6-point socket, the walls of those sockets are usually a lot thicker and it won't fit into that groove. So a 12-point socket fits into that groove. So you do wanna make sure you have a thinner wall socket.
Does it have to be a deep socket like that?
No,
Okay.
no, it doesn't stick up much.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the problem. Let's see.
So Rob's taking it apart. 2 things are gonna happen when he's taking this apart. That nut's gonna pop off and he's gonna be able to lift the cup right out. Or it's joined down here. He's going to actually twist that off and he's gonna disconnect it down here instead. And he won't be able to then lift it out. Either one is fine. Again, sometimes that nut will come out, you just pop this right out. Otherwise, just loosen that and you'll see when he takes it apart how it's held on there. Because even though he's disconnected it down here, there is the sensing diaphragm right there. And that sensing diaphragm is being held down by this. So it'll pull up, you'll actually make it get a little bit looser here. Yeah. Sometimes you just get it loose, like it's threaded on, there's another part down there that this is threaded onto there. And again, if that's, it may spin off here or it may just spin off at the nut. Either one is fine.
I think when we did it here, we used to have a fork on that.
Rob is strong, he doesn't even have to use tools to take these bolts out.
We'll just send it up before.
He's just good with 2 fingers, he's had a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
practice.
Yeah, these are fully tightened right now. Just kidding.
So Rob's gonna get to the point too, where he's gonna have to take this tubing off to get it to it. And Max brought up the point yesterday. A lot of guys, even on a short piece of tubing like this, I'll sometimes take and just put a little mark on which one is top, or I'll just lay it out so I know, because even though it's just going right here, sometimes there's just that little bit of a difference in the shape of the tubing. So when you go to put it on, it might make it harder. If you're taking any tubing off the pipeline, you want to make sure that you know where each piece of tubing goes. Usually it's not bad on these pilots, but if you have to take off a lot of tubing to get this off, mark your tubing so you know which way it goes back on. Because if you have a pile of tubing, it becomes like a puzzle. If you didn't mark, you're like, oh wait, which piece of tubing went where?
So, here's a good point to try to take a picture of what you have once you get that spring chamber off. And then you got these other spacers. Just come off, and these ones we mark with an arrow on the side, so you know which way it's facing up,
If you want.
if you want. I'm just gonna come right off. You'll notice here with the diaphragms too, that the diaphragms are one way. If you look, there's a shiny side to it, and then there's a fabric side to it. You should always make sure that the shiny side is facing towards pressure. So when you're taking this apart, so you know that the sensing diaphragm should be up, and then you got these diaphragms that are facing towards where your pressure is. The shiny side should be facing down on this one, down on this one, and up on
Yeah.
right. So
There was that whole thing with taking this out, and I said about the diaphragm, that he wouldn't be able to get it out. I forgot this is 1,000. So on a 600, it doesn't have that extra spacer plate on it. So this would have, instead of being on this little extension up on top, it would have been down on this nut down here. So this would have, and this diaphragm would have been stuck in place, so I wouldn't have been able to lift it up. I would have had to just take the bolts out, lift the whole thing out in one piece. Yeah, very important on the diaphragms, extremely important. Another thing to absolutely remember is that there is a right and wrong way to put the diaphragms in, and they will go in either way. You could easily put them in the wrong way if you're not paying attention, and it'll slide into the groove. It'll slide into that groove either way, and you may think it's right. And this one has a nice little curve going to it because it's been in. But when you get a new one, there's no grooves on it. Those grooves come from these little grooves here and the grooves on the nuts. So there is a reinforced side to these. So if you look at the diaphragm, you'll see there's like almost like a little fabric that's kind of woven into it that gives a little backing to it. So the rule of thumb, he said, is shiny side to gas, because if my gas is coming here, I want my reinforcement giving me that backing. If you put it in backwards, you're gonna find out as soon as you pressure it up, because it will pop instantly. You'll hear the pop and gas will start coming out of your diaphragm vent, and you'll have to take it and replace it. So just pay attention to which way the gas goes. And if you get confused, again, here's our vent port there. I know that's open atmosphere, so I know there's no gas in there, so shiny side will go facing away from that, because that's my gas side, this is my atmosphere side. So that's an extremely important thing. They'll go in just fine either way. Some of the manuals show a nice clear picture of this. Some of them have kind of crappy diagrams, admittedly, and they'll say convolute side up, and you're like, well, which side is the convolute? And I can't tell by the picture which side. Other ones, like the newer manuals that they've been releasing, have a much clearer picture of it. But if you haven't taken these apart in a long time, have a manual with you, because it will remind you of other important steps that we're trying to get.
Are there any online videos? Like,
I mean, I guess it's right, because it has
Does
top.
G have
Yeah, it
online
works.
videos?
Could not tell you.
Let me start a YouTube channel.
It'll never fit
I
in
did
there.
find one video, it wasn't made by GE, it was made by, one of the distributors, I think, and, they did like a 3D version of the pilot, and they were showing it like in a CAD model, but, I don't remember, I don't believe they made it all the way through the whole thing, so it was not the best video. They don't have a whole lot out there.
I'm more into the philosophy. Let's pick it apart, see what it is.
I have like 4 views on YouTube.
So, as he's been taking this apart, you're gonna see there's all O-rings. An O-ring, there's an O-ring, there's lots of little O-rings in this. When I'm doing a service on this, I like to strip it all the way down, and then as I'm putting it back together, I do the cleaning and I do the replacing of the soft goods. So that way I don't forget to do any. So I like to do what Rob is doing, where I'm gonna take it down and just strip it all down. You take that?
There's a, no, this is not. There's
You
an
should
actual
order a couple of these
copy here.
lubricants.
I passed it down.
Oh, you did?
To the Beckers, they're like 15, 20 inches.
So that's the way I like to do it. Just gonna take the top section off.
Yeah.
So Rob is doing a single acting balance valve. So he's gonna pop the balance valve out. This one uses balance valves also, but there's only gonna be one balance valve here, one balance valve here. On the double acting, we have 2 balance valves, and they are butt to butt. So, they only come out one way. You see, I mean, the opening is big enough for it to come out this way, it only comes out that way. So he'll show you that when he comes out, but that's the only difference is it's 2 exact same balance valves, just butt to butt. We talked about the importance of that clean, dry gas that you should have in here. Because, I mean, the orifices aren't big, so it doesn't take much to gunk up the insides of these, and especially when he pulls out the balance valve, I'll show you. It doesn't take much to, they're spring loaded. If they get dirty, you know, they're supposed to spring back when they're not using it. If they get gunk in them, they get dirty, they might start sticking for you, and that'll give you that excess bleed out of these. So if you ever have a pilot that's out there and you see it's not, all of a sudden it stops, you know, working right, you see erratic gauge behavior, first thing you're going to want to do is pull off that exhaust, you know, especially if it's venting to the outside, pull off that exhaust piping and see, are you getting gas flowing out of that exhaust when it shouldn't be blowing out of there. Because again, it should only be when the valve is actually moving. Full open, full closed, steady state, you should have no gas coming out of there. But if you take that vent out and it's just blowing gas constantly, it's a good sign that you got something stuck in your orifice, something stuck in your balance valve that's causing it not to work. And again, if that happens, you got to take it apart, try to clean it, or replace the balance valve. As far as cleaning the chambers, I've taken them apart where there's been all sorts of stuff in there. So they may have had a filter, but they've never changed the filter. So you just start getting distillates coming into your gas and everything like that. If you have to clean the inside of these, just brake cleaner is good. Nothing abrasive, nothing, that's gonna scratch the interior. Just spray the inside with brake cleaner. It evaporates pretty fast, but you do wanna give it a few minutes. You wanna give it a little time to dry before you put it back together. It doesn't take long, but you wanna give it a little time to dry in there. You could, I'll take, if it's really bad, I'll roll a paper towel, just pull it through the holes from one side to the other, just to make sure it's clean, because you do want that nice and clean on the inside.
You can see, once you take this section off, you can see the balance valve inside there. You'll notice that this balance valve is facing downwards. You're to get down to this chamber, balance valve is facing the opposite direction. Whereas in the double acting valves, you'll look at them, they're butt to butt. So you can see that in there.
Did you see that with your face?
You can get that out, you just get a screwdriver, you can just push this out.
So the good thing about the balance valve design is that it gives you that zero bleed at full open, full close, or at that steady state. But you'll see, compared to the seat and orifice design, the seat and nozzle, it's a little bit more complicated as far as the number of parts. On a seat nozzle design, that's all you're gonna have to do. They'll give you a new orifice in a repair kit. They'll give you a new seat, which pops right out of there with a little clip, and that's it, as far as this whole thing. But now he's gonna show you the whole balance valve assembly here, which, again, it's not that bad. It's only 4 pieces to it, but you'll see,
So here's the whole balance valve assembly. You guys pass that around so you can just keep it all together.
but the disadvantage, even though this is a lot easier to repair and take care of, is this bleeds all the time, anywhere between full and zero, full and fully open, fully closed. This will constantly bleed. So balance valve has the advantages. You're usually going to pick this design again for the larger valves.
7 years to go.
That's it right there. Make sure when you're tearing this apart that you, like every single piece, you tear apart, because there's O-rings. You take out this drum with the diaphragm in there, you're gonna screw that, there's an O-ring in there, so just make sure you tear it down to bare bones.
You get O-rings from O-rings.
The repair kits come with all of this? Like you wouldn't be able just to order a new balance thing because they
You
would want you.
absolutely
Oh, you can?
You
All right.
can.
All right.
And if you know you're gonna be doing maintenance on these, order the repair kits, because
Yeah.
it'll give you everything you need in a
Everything.
repair kit. Because what happens is, I like the idea of ordering some spare diaphragms and some spare O-rings and that.
That's what I was
Because
thinking.
if you need
The
one
major
part,
you would
Yeah.
need a diaphragm.
you blow a sensing diaphragm,
How do you feel about it?
and you only have repair kits, what are you gonna do? You're gonna rob that repair kit, and now you have an incomplete repair kit. Or, I lost this O-ring, let me steal this O-ring from a repair kit, and now you have an incomplete repair
Yeah, I
kit.
just didn't know if you recommended if you weren't gonna take it apart just to replace this, if you would replace the
Yeah.
O-rings then.